The Critical Thinker's Guide to Wealth. Transforming your financial life through thoughtful decision-making. Prologue. The mind behind the money. The conference room fell silent as Sarah stared at her investment portfolio's deep red numbers. After 15 years of careful saving and what she thought was strategic investing, she found herself paralyzed by fear during the market downturn. Her finger hovered over the sell all button, emotions warring with logic as she contemplated liquidating everything to stop the bleeding. This moment, this battle between emotion and reason, between immediate reaction and thoughtful response, captures the essence of why we need critical thinking in our financial lives. Sarah's story, like many of ours, isn't just about money. It's about how we think about money, how we make decisions, and how our minds often work against our best interests when it comes to financial matters. The hidden forces. We'd like to believe we're rational beings when it comes to money. We read financial books, study market trends, and pride ourselves on making logical decisions. Yet research consistently shows that our financial choices are deeply influenced by psychological factors we rarely recognize. Fear and greed drive market movements more than fundamental values. Our perception of money is shaped by childhood experiences we may not even remember. We make different decisions depending on how choices are framed, even when the underlying options are identical. Our need for social validation often overrides our financial common sense. These hidden forces aren't character flaws, they're part of being human. But in today's complex financial world, understanding and managing these psychological factors has become as important as understanding market mechanics. The Critical Thinking Revolution. This book proposes a radical shift in how we approach financial decisions. Instead of focusing solely on financial knowledge, we'll develop critical thinking skills specifically tailored to money matters. Through real stories and practical exercises, we'll explore how to recognize and manage emotional triggers in financial decisions, ways to develop systematic thinking processes that guard against impulsive choices, methods for distinguishing between skill and luck in investment outcomes, techniques for aligning financial decisions with personal values and life goals. Consider Michael, a successful entrepreneur whose story we'll explore in detail later. Despite his business acumen, he found himself making increasingly risky investments, chasing returns he didn't need at the expense of security he did need. Through developing critical thinking skills, he learned to question his motivations and create a more thoughtful approach to wealth management. Beyond traditional financial advice. Traditional financial advice often focuses on what to do: save more, invest regularly, diversify your portfolio. While these principles are important, they don't address the crucial question of how to actually implement them in the face of emotional and psychological barriers. This book fills that gap by providing frameworks for financial decision-making, systematic approaches to evaluating choices, methods for managing emotional responses, tools for maintaining long-term perspective, psychological insight, understanding common cognitive biases, recognizing emotional triggers, developing self-awareness in financial matters, practical implementation strategies, converting knowledge into action, building sustainable financial habits, creating personal accountability systems. The journey ahead. Throughout this book, we'll follow the journeys of real people facing common financial challenges. Their stories will illustrate both the obstacles and opportunities in developing better financial thinking habits. Lisa, a young professional learning to balance immediate gratification with long-term security. James, a retiree navigating the psychological challenges of moving from saving to spending. Maria, an experienced investor discovering that less activity often leads to better results. These aren't just success stories. They're maps for your own journey toward better financial decision-making. The real goal. While this book will help you make better financial decisions, its ultimate goal is more profound. Money decisions reflect and affect every aspect of our lives. Our relationships, our values, our sense of security and possibility. By developing critical thinking skills in financial matters, we're really developing tools for living more thoughtful, intentional lives. Consider Anna, whose story opens Chapter 1. Her journey began with trying to make better investment decisions, but led to profound insights about her relationship with money, success, and personal worth. Through applying critical thinking to her financial life, she discovered patterns that influenced everything from her career choices to her personal relationships. A new approach. This book isn't about getting rich quick or finding the perfect investment strategy. Instead, it's about developing the mental tools to make thoughtful, values-based financial decisions, maintain perspective during market volatility, align money choices with life goals, build sustainable wealth-building habits. We'll explore these themes through a combination of real-world case studies, practical exercises, scientific research, implementation strategies, your role in the journey. As you read this book, you're invited to be more than a passive consumer of information. Each chapter includes exercises and reflection questions designed to help you identify your own psychological patterns with money, develop personal critical thinking frameworks, create practical strategies for better financial decisions, build sustainable habits for long-term success. The path forward. The chapters ahead will guide you through a progressive development of critical thinking skills in financial matters. We'll start with fundamental concepts and build toward more complex applications, always grounding theory in practical, real-world situations. You'll learn to recognize emotional triggers in financial decisions, develop systematic analysis methods, create personal decision-making frameworks, build resilience against market volatility. A beginning, not an end. As you embark on this journey, remember that developing critical thinking skills is an ongoing process, not a destination. The goal isn't to eliminate emotions from financial decisions. That's neither possible nor desirable. Instead, we'll work to understand and manage our psychological responses while developing more thoughtful approaches to financial choices. The path ahead may challenge some of your existing beliefs about money and success. It will certainly require effort and commitment. But the rewards, better decisions, reduced stress, and greater financial wisdom make the journey worthwhile. Welcome to the beginning of your critical thinking revolution in financial matters. Let's begin. Chapter 1. The Foundation of Financial Wisdom. The morning sun filtered through the blinds of Thomas Chen's office as he reviewed his client's portfolio for the 1,000th time. As a financial advisor with 20 years of experience, he had seen countless market cycles. But what fascinated him most wasn't the movement of markets. It was the movement of minds. His next appointment would prove to be particularly illuminating. Emily Martinez sat across from him, her fingers nervously twisting the strap of her designer handbag. Despite her successful career as a software engineer and a comfortable six-figure salary, she found herself trapped in a cycle of financial decisions that left her feeling anxious and uncertain. "I know all the right things to do," she explained, frustration evident in her voice. "I've read the books, followed the blogs, even taken courses in financial management. But somehow, I keep making the same mistakes." Thomas nodded, recognizing a pattern he'd seen hundreds of times before. Knowledge, while necessary, wasn't sufficient for making sound financial decisions. The missing piece was something more fundamental: critical thinking applied specifically to financial matters. "Let me share something with you," Thomas began, pulling out a worn notebook. "Every successful client I've worked with over the past 2 decades has developed something I call financial wisdom. It's different from financial knowledge. While knowledge tells you what to do, wisdom helps you understand why you do what you do." Emily leaned forward, intrigued. Her technical background had trained her to look for patterns and solutions, but she had never considered applying that same analytical rigor to her financial behavior. As Thomas explained, financial wisdom begins with understanding our relationship with money, not just as a tool for transactions, but as a mirror reflecting our fears, hopes, and deeply held beliefs. The first principle of financial wisdom is self-awareness. Thomas asked Emily to recall her earliest memory involving money. After a moment's reflection, she described watching her parents argue about finances during the recession of the early 1990s. Her father had lost his job, and the family had to dramatically cut back on expenses. "I remember promising myself I'd never be in that position," she said quietly. "I guess that's why I keep such a large emergency fund even though I know I could be investing that money for better returns. This revelation illuminated how past experiences shape our present financial decisions. Emily's oversized emergency fund wasn't simply a financial choice. It was an emotional response to childhood trauma. Understanding this connection was the first step toward making more balanced decisions. Thomas shared the story of another client, Michael Wong, a successful entrepreneur who had the opposite problem. Growing up in poverty, Michael had developed an almost compulsive need to pursue higher returns, taking increasingly risky investments even though his wealth had grown well beyond his needs. His childhood experience of scarcity drove him to chase abundance, even at the cost of security. The second principle of financial wisdom is recognizing the difference between rational analysis and emotional reaction. Thomas pulled out a graph showing the S&P 500's performance over the past year. "Where on this chart would you have made investment decisions?" he asked Emily. She pointed to several peaks and troughs, acknowledging that she often felt the urge to buy when markets were high and sell during downturns. "That's perfectly normal," Thomas assured her. "Our brains are wired to seek pleasure and avoid pain. In the context of financial markets, this often leads us to buy high and sell low, exactly the opposite of what we should do. The key," he explained, "isn't to eliminate emotions from financial decisions, but to recognize their influence and develop systems to manage them." He shared the story of Sarah Chun, a retired teacher who had developed a unique approach to managing her emotional responses to market volatility. Whenever she felt the urge to make a significant financial decision, she would write down her reasoning in a dedicated journal and wait 48 hours before acting. This simple practice had saved her from countless impulsive decisions during market downturns. The third principle of financial wisdom is understanding the role of context in financial decisions. Emily's six-figure salary meant little without considering her location, a high-cost coastal city, career trajectory, technology with its boom and bust cycles, and personal goals, which included eventually starting her own company. Thomas introduced Emily to the concept of financial context mapping, a process of examining how different aspects of life influence financial choices. He shared the experience of David Park, a client who had initially focused solely on maximizing returns until he realized that his true financial goal was having the flexibility to spend more time with his aging parents. This realization led to a completely different investment strategy, one that prioritized steady income and liquidity over maximum growth. The fourth principle of financial wisdom is recognizing the limits of our knowledge and control. This was particularly challenging for Emily, whose technical background had trained her to seek definitive answers. In software engineering, she explained, there's usually a right answer, even if it's complex. But with investing, it seems like even the experts can't agree on the best approach. Thomas smiled, drawing from his decades of experience. That's because financial markets are complex adaptive systems, influenced by countless variables including human behavior. The most successful investors I've known are those who embrace this uncertainty rather than fight it. He shared the story of Emily Martinez, no relation to Emily, a quantitative analyst who had initially approached investing like a math problem to be solved. Over time, she learned to appreciate the role of uncertainty and developed strategies that accounted for multiple possible outcomes rather than trying to predict a single future. As their session drew to a close, Emily had begun to see her financial decisions in a new light. Her technical knowledge was valuable, but it needed to be complemented by critical thinking skills specifically adapted to financial decision-making. Thomas assigned her first exercise. For the next month, she would maintain a financial decision journal, recording not just what financial choices she made, but why she made them. The sun was setting as Emily left Thomas's office, casting long shadows across the city streets. She felt a new sense of possibility, not because she had learned new financial strategies, but because she had begun to understand the importance of how she thought about money, not just what she knew about it. This journey toward financial wisdom isn't unique to Emily. Every day, countless individuals struggle with financial decisions, not because they lack information, but because they haven't developed the critical thinking skills necessary to apply that information effectively. The path to better financial outcomes begins not with more knowledge, but with better thinking. In the chapters that follow, We'll explore each principle of financial wisdom in detail, examining how successful individuals have applied critical thinking to their financial lives and developing practical tools for making better financial decisions. But remember, the goal isn't to eliminate emotion from financial choices. It's to develop a more thoughtful, balanced approach to managing money. As Thomas often reminds his clients, financial wisdom isn't about knowing everything. It's about thinking clearly about what we do know and making peace with what we don't. It's about developing the mental tools to navigate financial decisions with confidence, even in uncertain times. Emily's journey has just begun, and so has yours. Welcome to the path of financial wisdom through critical thinking. Chapter 2. Mapping your financial psychology. 3 weeks after her initial meeting with Thomas Chen, Emily Martinez returned to his office, clutching her financial decision journal. The simple leather-bound notebook was now filled with daily observations about her spending habits, emotional triggers, and investment impulses. What had started as a simple recording exercise had become a window into patterns she had never noticed before. "I discovered something strange," Emily began, opening the journal to a dog-eared page. "Every Sunday night, I spend hours researching investment opportunities and often make trades. It's almost compulsive." Thomas nodded, recognizing a pattern he had seen in many successful professionals. The Sunday night trading ritual wasn't really about investing. It was about control. "When we feel uncertainty about the week ahead," Thomas explained, "we often seek to create a sense of control in other areas of our lives." This insight marked the beginning of Emily's journey in understanding her financial psychology, the hidden mental patterns that shaped her money decisions. Understanding financial psychology begins with recognizing that our relationship with money is formed long before we make our first investment or open our first savings account. Our attitudes toward wealth, risk, and security are shaped by childhood experiences, cultural influences, and personal narratives we may not even be conscious of. Consider James Wong, another of Thomas's clients whose story illuminates this principle. As a successful surgeon, James had accumulated significant wealth, yet he found himself unable to spend money on basic comforts without experiencing intense guilt. Through careful reflection, he realized this behavior stemmed from watching his immigrant parents sacrifice everything for his education. His frugality wasn't just about saving money. It was about honoring their sacrifice. The key to mapping your financial psychology lies in understanding these deep connections between past experiences and present behaviors. Thomas introduced Emily to the concept of financial archaeology, the systematic exploration of how our money habits are formed. This process begins with examining 3 fundamental aspects of our financial personality: our money scripts, emotional triggers, and behavioral patterns. Money scripts are the underlying beliefs we hold about wealth and financial success. These scripts often run in the background of our consciousness, influencing decisions without our awareness. For Emily, a powerful money script emerged through her journaling. Financial security means never having to depend on anyone else. This belief, formed during her parents' difficult divorce, had driven her to maintain excessive cash reserves despite the opportunity cost. Thomas shared the story of Rebecca Chun, a creative director who discovered that her constant pursuit of higher-paying projects was driven by a money script formed in art school. Creative work isn't real work unless it pays well. This belief had led her to prioritize lucrative but unfulfilling projects over work she truly enjoyed. Understanding this script allowed her to make more balanced decisions about which opportunities to pursue. Emotional triggers are specific situations or thoughts that provoke strong financial reactions. Through her journal entries, Emily identified a clear pattern. Market volatility triggered memories of her father's job loss, leading to an almost irresistible urge to sell investments during downturns. Recognizing this trigger was the first step in developing strategies to manage it. Michael Torres, a retired teacher Thomas had worked with, discovered that watching his neighbors make large purchases triggered feelings of inadequacy, leading to unnecessary spending. By identifying this trigger, he developed strategies to manage his emotional responses without compromising his financial goals. Behavioral patterns are the habitual ways we interact with money. These patterns often form a self-reinforcing cycle. Our beliefs influence our emotions, which drive our behaviors, which then reinforce our original beliefs. Breaking this cycle requires understanding each component and how they interact. Sarah Lynn, a software developer like Emily, recognized a pattern of impulse buying expensive technology whenever she felt stressed about work. The behavior provided temporary relief but contributed to long-term financial stress, creating a cycle that took conscious effort to break. As Emily continued her financial psychology mapping, she began to see how these elements interacted in her own life. Her money script about independence fed into an emotional sensitivity to market volatility, which drove a pattern of overvaluing cash and underinvesting in growth opportunities. Thomas introduced a framework for analyzing these patterns called the financial psychology matrix. This tool helps individuals examine their financial behaviors across different dimensions. David Park's experience with the matrix revealed how his cultural background influenced his investment decisions. Growing up in a community that valued real estate ownership, he had concentrated too much of his wealth in property, ignoring other investment opportunities. Understanding this bias allowed him to develop a more balanced portfolio strategy. The process of mapping financial psychology isn't just about understanding past patterns. It's about creating new, more effective ways of thinking about money. Maria Gonzalez, a small business owner, used her insights to develop a personalized system for making financial decisions. She created what she called circuit breakers, specific practices that helped her pause and reflect before making significant financial choices. For Emily, this process led to a profound realization. Her Sunday night trading habits weren't really about investment research. They were a way of coping with work-related anxiety. Armed with this understanding, she could develop more constructive ways to manage her concerns about the upcoming work week. The final piece of financial psychology mapping involves understanding how our money patterns affect our relationships. Thomas shared the story of a couple, John and Lisa Chun, who discovered that their financial conflicts weren't really about money. They were about different cultural attitudes toward family obligations and security. As Emily's session drew to a close, Thomas assigned her next exercise, creating a financial timeline that would track significant money-related events in her life and their influence on her current financial behavior. This would help her understand how her financial psychology had evolved over time and identify opportunities for positive change. Understanding our financial psychology doesn't mean we'll never make emotional decisions about money. The goal is to bring awareness to our patterns so we can make more conscious choices. As Thomas often reminds his clients, the most dangerous financial patterns are the ones we don't know we have. Emily left the office that day with a deeper appreciation for the complexity of her relationship with money. Her technical knowledge of finance was important, but understanding her financial psychology would be crucial for making better decisions. In the chapters that follow, we'll explore specific strategies for working with our financial psychology rather than against it. We'll learn how successful individuals have transformed their money patterns and developed more effective approaches to financial decision-making. Remember, the journey to financial wisdom isn't just about accumulating knowledge. It's about understanding ourselves and how we think about money. This understanding becomes the foundation for all our financial decisions, from daily spending choices to long-term investment strategies. Chapter 3: Breaking the Emotional Cycle. The autumn rain tapped against the windows of Thomas Chen's office as Emily Martinez studied her financial timeline. The exercise had revealed patterns she hadn't expected, cycles of confidence and doubt that corresponded with market movements, echoing the financial anxieties she'd witnessed in her childhood home. "I noticed something interesting," Thomas said, pointing to a cluster of entries from the previous year. "Every major financial decision you've made follows a similar emotional pattern. Let's explore what that means for your long-term success." Breaking the emotional cycle of financial decisions requires understanding three fundamental truths. Emotions are inevitable, patterns are predictable, and change is possible. Thomas had seen countless clients struggle with this cycle, but those who learned to work with their emotions rather than against them achieved remarkable results. Consider the story of Marcus Johnson, a talented software architect who approached every investment decision as if he were debugging code. His logical mind served him well in his career, but when it came to money, he found himself making increasingly emotional choices during market volatility. It wasn't until he learned to recognize and work with his emotional patterns that his investment results began to improve. The key, Thomas explained to Emily, isn't to eliminate emotions from financial decisions. That's impossible and potentially harmful. Instead, we need to understand our emotional patterns and develop systems to manage them effectively. He shared the experience of Linda Chen, no relation, a successful entrepreneur who had developed a unique approach to managing her emotional responses to market movements. She created what she called an emotional circuit breaker, a series of questions she had to answer before making any significant financial decision. This simple but effective system helped her avoid the kind of reactive decisions that had previously undermined her financial success. Emily leaned forward, intrigued by the concept. But how do you maintain that kind of discipline when everything seems to be falling apart? She asked, thinking of her own struggles during market downturns. Thomas smiled, recognizing the crucial question at the heart of emotional financial management. He shared the story of Robert Kim, a retired professor who had weathered multiple market crashes without panic selling. Robert's secret wasn't immunity to fear. He felt it just as strongly as anyone else. His advantage was a system he had developed to channel those emotions into constructive action. When markets decline, Thomas explained, Robert doesn't try to suppress his anxiety. Instead, he uses it as a trigger to review his investment thesis, check his asset allocation, and look for rebalancing opportunities. He turns emotional energy into analytical power. The conversation turned to Emily's own emotional patterns. Her financial timeline revealed a tendency to seek security through control, manifesting in excessive trading during periods of uncertainty. This insight led to a deeper discussion about the relationship between emotion and action in financial decisions. Thomas introduced the concept of the emotional escalator, the way financial emotions tend to intensify unless we have specific strategies to manage them. He shared the story of Patricia Martinez, no relation to Emily, a corporate lawyer who had developed a unique approach to managing this escalation. Patricia created what she called emotional waypoints, predetermined points in her financial decision-making process where she would pause to assess her emotional state. This simple practice helped her identify when she was making decisions based on temporary emotional spikes rather than long-term strategy. The rain continued outside as Thomas and Emily delved deeper into strategies for breaking emotional cycles. They explored how successful investors maintain perspective during market volatility, drawing lessons from individuals who had mastered their emotional responses to financial stress. Sarah Wong's story proved particularly relevant. As a day trader turned long-term investor, she had learned the hard way about the cost of emotional decision-making. Her transformation began when she started keeping an emotional trading log, documenting not just her trades, but the feelings that drove them. This practice revealed patterns that had been invisible to her, despite years of market experience. The most dangerous patterns, Thomas observed, are the ones we don't know we have. He explained how our financial behaviors often operate on autopilot, driven by emotional responses we've never examined. Breaking these patterns requires conscious awareness and deliberate practice. Emily's own journey with emotional pattern recognition was just beginning. Through her financial decision journal, she had started to identify specific triggers that led to impulsive financial decisions. The next step was developing strategies to manage these triggers effectively. Thomas introduced her to the concept of emotional reframing, a technique used by successful investors to transform potentially destructive emotional responses into constructive actions. He shared the story of David Chen, who had learned to view market volatility not as a threat, but as an opportunity to review and potentially rebalance his portfolio. The conversation turned to practical implementation. Emily needed specific strategies she could use when emotions threatened to overwhelm her financial decision-making process. Thomas outlined a framework that had helped many of his clients. Recognition, learning to identify emotional triggers before they lead to action. Pause, creating space between emotion and decision through specific practices. Analysis, using structured thinking tools to evaluate options objectively. Action, making decisions based on pre-established criteria rather than temporary emotions. The framework wasn't about suppressing emotions, but about channeling them into more constructive patterns. Thomas shared examples of how different clients had adapted this framework to their own circumstances. Maria Gonzalez, a small business owner, used a 24-hour rule for any financial decision involving more than $1,000. This simple practice helped her avoid emotional spending while still maintaining the flexibility she needed to run her business effectively. As their session drew to a close, the rain had stopped, and rays of sunlight broke through the clouds. Emily had gained not just understanding, but practical tools for managing her emotional responses to financial situations. Thomas assigned her next challenge, creating a personal emotional circuit breaker system tailored to her specific patterns and triggers. This would become her first line of defense against the kind of reactive decisions that had previously undermined her financial success. The journey to emotional mastery in financial decisions is ongoing. As Thomas often reminds his clients, the goal isn't to become emotionless investors, but to develop a more balanced, aware approach to financial decision-making. Emily left the office that day with a deeper understanding of how emotions influence financial choices and specific strategies for managing these influences. Her technical knowledge of finance remained valuable, but now she had tools to address the emotional aspects of money management that had previously eluded her. In the chapters that follow, we'll explore more advanced applications of these emotional management techniques, examining how successful investors maintain perspective during market volatility and make decisions that align with their long-term goals rather than short-term emotional responses. Remember, emotions are an inevitable part of financial decision-making. The key to success lies not in eliminating them, but in understanding and managing them effectively. This understanding becomes the foundation for sustainable financial success. Chapter 4. The Architecture of Financial Decisions. The morning light cast long shadows across Thomas Chen's desk as he reviewed Emily Martinez's emotional circuit breaker system. Her detailed framework for managing financial decisions impressed him, but he noticed something crucial missing: a structured approach to analyzing the decisions themselves. "You've built excellent emotional safeguards," Thomas observed, "but now we need to construct the analytical framework that will support your decision-making process." He pulled out a folder containing the story of Michael Chong, a successful architect who had applied his professional principles to financial decision-making. Michael's approach fascinated Emily. Just as he wouldn't design a building without considering its foundation, structure, and purpose, he refused to make financial decisions without examining their fundamental elements. His systematic approach had helped him navigate the 2008 financial crisis while many of his colleagues panicked. The architecture of financial decisions, Thomas explained, is about building a structured approach to analyzing choices before emotions come into play. He shared how Michael had developed a 3-tier system for evaluating financial decisions: foundation, basic security needs; structure, growth and opportunity; and purpose, long-term goals and values. Emily recognized elements of her own decision-making process, but saw how haphazard it had been in comparison. Her technical background had taught her to analyze code systematically. Why hadn't she applied the same rigor to her financial choices? Thomas introduced her to Janet Wong, another client whose story illustrated the power of structured decision-making. As a research scientist, Janet had initially struggled to reconcile her data-driven professional mindset with the uncertainties of financial markets. She developed what she called her financial laboratory, a systematic approach to testing investment hypotheses before committing real money. The conversation turned to the practical elements of building a decision architecture. Thomas shared how successful investors create frameworks that align with their thinking styles while accounting for common cognitive biases. David Rodriguez, a former chess master-turned-investor, applied strategic thinking principles to his financial decisions. He developed a habit of thinking several moves ahead, considering not just the immediate consequences of financial choices, but their potential ripple effects over time. As Emily absorbed these examples, Thomas introduced the concept of decision nodes, critical points in the financial decision-making process where different choices could lead to significantly different outcomes. He shared the story of Sarah Chun, who had developed a visual mapping system for major financial decisions. helping her see connections and consequences she might otherwise have missed. The rain began to fall outside as they delved deeper into the components of effective decision architecture. Thomas emphasized how successful investors build systems that work with their natural thinking patterns rather than against them. Maria Torres, a graphic designer, created a visual decision-making framework that matched her creative thinking style. Her system used color coding and spatial relationships to represent different aspects of financial choices, making complex decisions more intuitive for her visual mind. Emily's own background in software engineering suggested an opportunity. Together with Thomas, she began sketching out a decision framework that incorporated the logical structures she used in coding. They explored how principles like modularity and scalability could apply to financial decision-making. The conversation turned to implementation challenges. How could she maintain this structured approach when faced with real-world pressures and time constraints? Thomas shared strategies from clients who had successfully embedded decision architecture into their daily financial lives. Robert Kim, a busy emergency room doctor, had created a simplified version of his decision framework that he could apply even during hectic times. His rapid analysis protocol helped him make sound financial choices without requiring extensive time for analysis. As their session progressed, Thomas and Emily worked on adapting these principles to her specific needs. They developed a framework that combined her analytical strengths with the emotional awareness she had been developing. The framework needed to be both robust and flexible, capable of handling both routine financial decisions and major life choices. Thomas shared how different clients had adapted their decision architecture to various life stages and circumstances. Lisa Chen's story proved particularly relevant. As her life circumstances changed, marriage, children, career transitions, she had successfully modified her decision framework while maintaining its core principles. This adaptability had helped her maintain financial stability through multiple life changes. As the afternoon light faded, Emily had begun to see how a well-designed decision architecture could transform her approach to financial choices. The framework they had developed would serve as a foundation for future decisions, while remaining flexible enough to evolve with her needs. Thomas assigned her next challenge, testing the new framework with real decisions while maintaining her emotional awareness practices. This integration of structured analysis and emotional intelligence would be crucial for long-term success. The chapter closes with Emily leaving Thomas's office, armed with new tools for building and maintaining her financial decision architecture. Her journey continues, but now with a clearer understanding of how to construct and implement systematic decision-making processes. The following week, Emily returned to Thomas's office with her first attempts at implementing the decision architecture they had developed. Her experiences revealed both the power and the challenges of applying systematic thinking to real-world financial choices. I tried using the framework for a decision about my emergency fund, Emily explained, opening her laptop to share her analysis. It helped me see the trade-offs more clearly, but I found myself getting caught in analysis paralysis. How do you know when you've analyzed enough? Thomas nodded, recognizing a common challenge among analytical thinkers. He shared the story of Alex Rivera, a data scientist who had faced similar struggles. Alex had developed what he called the minimum viable decision approach, identifying the essential factors needed for a sound choice while avoiding endless analysis. The goal of decision architecture isn't perfect decisions, Thomas explained, but better decisions made consistently. He drew from his experience with Rachel Kim, a judge who had developed an elegant approach to balancing thorough analysis with practical necessity. Rachel's system involved 3 levels of decision analysis: quick assessments for routine choices, moderate analysis for significant decisions, and deep evaluation for life-changing financial moves. This tiered approach helped her allocate her analytical resources effectively while maintaining the integrity of her decision-making process. The conversation turned to the integration of quantitative and qualitative factors in financial decisions. Emily's framework had focused heavily on numbers, but Thomas helped her see how successful investors incorporate less tangible considerations into their analysis. Mark Chun, a successful portfolio manager, had learned this lesson through experience. Despite his sophisticated quantitative models, his best investment decisions came when he balanced numerical analysis with broader contextual understanding. He developed what he called contextual decision mapping, a way to visualize how different factors influence each other. As they explored these concepts, Thomas introduced Emily to the idea of decision networks, understanding how financial choices interconnect and influence future options. He shared how Sandra Martinez had used this principle to make better career decisions by considering their financial implications across multiple time horizons. The afternoon deepened as they worked on refining Emily's framework to incorporate these insights. They discussed how to balance complexity with usability, drawing lessons from successful investors who had maintained their systematic approach through various market conditions. Thomas shared the story of William Park, who had developed a unique way of testing his decision framework through paper trading, applying his system to hypothetical situations before using it for real decisions. This practice helped him refine his approach while building confidence in the process. Emily began to see how her framework could evolve beyond a simple decision tree into a more sophisticated tool for financial analysis. They worked on incorporating feedback loops, ways to learn from both successful and unsuccessful decisions to improve the framework over time. Karen Wong's experience proved instructive. As a systems engineer, she had applied the principle of iterative improvement to her financial decision-making process. Each major decision became an opportunity to refine and enhance her framework. The conversation turned to implementation challenges in different market conditions. Thomas shared strategies from clients who had successfully maintained their systematic approach during periods of market stress. David Lin, for instance, had developed specific protocols for high volatility periods that helped him stay true to his framework when emotions ran high. As the day's shadows lengthened, Emily and Thomas worked on integrating these new insights into her framework. They developed what Thomas called decision checkpoints, specific moments in the analysis process where Emily would step back to ensure her framework was serving its intended purpose. The refined architecture they created balanced rigorous analysis with practical usability. It incorporated both quantitative metrics and qualitative factors, while maintaining enough flexibility to adapt to changing circumstances. Thomas emphasized the importance of regular review and refinement. He shared how Maria Chun had scheduled quarterly framework reviews to ensure her decision architecture remained aligned with her evolving financial goals and circumstances. As their session drew to a close, Thomas assigned Emily a new challenge, documenting both the decisions she made using the framework and those she made outside of it. This comparison would help her understand when and why she deviated from her systematic approach. Remember, Thomas said as Emily gathered her things, the best decision architecture is one you'll actually use consistently. It should enhance your natural thinking process, not replace it. Emily left the office that evening with a deeper appreciation for the balance between systematic analysis and practical implementation. Her framework had evolved from a rigid structure into a more organic tool for financial decision-making. The lessons of this chapter extend beyond personal finance. Whether in business, career choices, or investment decisions, a well-designed decision architecture can help us make better choices consistently while accounting for both analytical and emotional factors. In the chapters that follow, we'll explore how successful investors continue to refine and adapt their decision frameworks through changing market conditions and life circumstances. The journey toward better financial decisions is ongoing, but a solid architectural foundation makes each step more secure. Chapter 5. The Value of Time. The late afternoon sun painted golden stripes across Thomas Chen's office as Emily Martinez reviewed her new decision framework. One pattern had become increasingly clear. Her relationship with time profoundly influenced her financial choices, often in ways she hadn't recognized. Time, Thomas began, settling into his chair, is perhaps the most misunderstood element in financial decision-making. He shared the story of Richard Park, a talented young programmer who had approached investing like a series of sprint coding sessions, expecting quick results and growing frustrated when they didn't materialize. Richard's story resonated with Emily. Like many in the tech industry, she had grown accustomed to rapid iteration and immediate feedback. This mindset, while valuable in software development, had led her to overtrade her investment accounts, seeking quick wins instead of long-term growth. The market, Thomas explained, operates on a different timescale than most of our daily experiences. He pulled out a chart showing the S&P 500's performance over several decades. The daily volatility that caused so much anxiety appeared as mere ripples in the longer-term trend. Sarah Lynn's experience illustrated this principle perfectly. As a day trader, she had obsessed over minute-by-minute price movements, leading to stress and subpar returns. Her transformation began when she started thinking in decades rather than days. This shift in time perspective not only improved her investment results, but also reduced her anxiety about market movements. The conversation turned to what Thomas called temporal arbitrage, the advantage available to investors willing to think and act on longer time horizons than the market average. He shared how Maria Gonzalez had used this principle to build significant wealth despite starting with modest means. Maria's strategy was simple but powerful. She invested consistently in quality companies and gave her investments time to compound. While others frantically traded in and out of positions, she maintained her long-term perspective, understanding that time was her most powerful ally. Emily leaned forward, intrigued by the concept. But how do you maintain that long-term focus when everything around you demands immediate attention? She asked, thinking of her own tendency to check investment accounts daily. Thomas smiled, recognizing a crucial question. He shared the story of David Chen, who had developed a unique approach to managing time perspective in his investment decisions. David created what he called time boundaries, specific rules about when and how often he would review different aspects of his portfolio. The concept of time boundaries fascinated Emily. In software development, she used similar principles to manage project timelines and deliverables. Could the same structured approach help her maintain a better time perspective in investing? As they explored this idea, Thomas introduced the concept of timescale alignment, ensuring that investment strategies match the actual time horizon of financial goals. He shared how Rebecca Torres had transformed her investment approach by clearly mapping her financial goals to specific time horizons. The rain began to fall outside as they delved deeper into practical applications. Thomas helped Emily develop her own timescale framework, considering both her immediate needs and long-term aspirations. They discussed how different investment strategies could align with various time horizons. Michael Wong's story provided valuable insights. As a surgeon, he had learned to operate on multiple time scales, responding to immediate emergencies while maintaining awareness of long-term patient outcomes. He applied this same mindset to his investments, developing strategies for different time horizons while maintaining a coherent overall approach. The conversation turned to the psychological challenges of maintaining a long-term perspective. Thomas shared techniques that successful investors use to resist the urge for immediate action. Lisa Chun, for instance, had developed a timeout protocol for making investment decisions, ensuring she never acted on short-term emotions. As their session progressed, Emily began to see how her relationship with time had influenced her financial choices. Her tendency to seek immediate feedback and quick results had led to overtrading and unnecessary stress. Understanding this pattern was the first step toward developing a more balanced approach. Thomas introduced the concept of temporal diversification, spreading investments across different time horizons to manage both risk and emotional responses. He shared how James Wilson had used this principle to build a portfolio that served both his short-term needs and long-term goals. The afternoon light was fading as they worked on incorporating these insights into Emily's decision framework. They developed specific strategies for maintaining a long-term perspective while acknowledging the reality of short-term needs and emotions. Sarah Rodriguez's experience proved particularly relevant. As a software engineer turned successful investor, she had learned to apply the principle of progressive enhancement to her investment strategy. She built a strong foundation of long-term investments while gradually adding shorter-term tactical positions. Thomas assigned Emily her next challenge, developing a personal time perspective protocol, a structured approach to managing different time horizons in her investment decisions. This would complement her emotional circuit breaker system and decision architecture. As Emily prepared to leave, Thomas shared one final insight. Time in the market is more important than timing the market. This simple truth had transformed countless investors' approaches, helping them maintain perspective during market volatility. The chapter closes with Emily stepping out into the rain, her mind full of new insights about the role of time in financial decision-making. Her journey continues, but now with a deeper understanding of how time perspective influences financial success. The lessons of this chapter extend beyond investment decisions. Understanding and managing our relationship with time affects every aspect of financial life, from daily spending choices to long-term financial planning. In the chapters that follow, we'll explore how successful investors integrate these time management principles with other elements of critical thinking in finance. Chapter 6: The Social Dimension of Money. The coffee shop buzzed with morning energy as Emily Martinez met Thomas Chen for their first session outside his office. The change in environment was intentional. Thomas wanted Emily to observe how social dynamics influence financial behavior in real time. "Watch the customers for a moment," Thomas suggested, gesturing toward the line of people waiting to order. "What do you notice about their choices?" Emily observed as one customer glanced at another's elaborate drink order, then modified their own simple coffee order to match. Social influence shapes our financial decisions in ways we rarely notice, Thomas explained. He shared the story of Peter Chong, a successful tech executive who had found himself trapped in an escalating cycle of lifestyle inflation, driven largely by his peer group's spending habits. Peter's wake-up call came when he realized he was spending nearly half his substantial income maintaining an image that didn't actually bring him satisfaction. His journey to break free from social pressure while maintaining professional relationships offered valuable lessons in managing the social dimensions of money. The challenge, Thomas explained, isn't just recognizing social influences, but developing strategies to manage them effectively. He described how Sarah Lynn had transformed her approach to social spending after realizing how much her financial decisions were driven by a desire to maintain certain friendships. Emily nodded, thinking of her own social circle in the tech industry. "Sometimes it feels like everyone's comparing investment returns or talking about their latest startup investment," she admitted. "It's hard not to get caught up in it." Thomas shared how Rachel Wong had faced similar pressures in the finance industry. She developed what she called social boundaries, specific rules about discussing money and investments with colleagues that helped her maintain her own strategy without feeling isolated. The conversation turned to the broader impact of social media on financial decisions. Thomas described how Maria Rodriguez had noticed her investment choices becoming increasingly influenced by online chatter. She developed a systematic approach to filtering financial information that helped her separate valuable insights from social noise. As they observed the morning crowd, Thomas introduced the concept of social anchoring, how our perception of normal financial behavior is shaped by our immediate social circle. He shared how David Chun had consciously expanded his social network to include people with different financial perspectives, helping him make more balanced decisions. Emily recognized this pattern in her own life. Her social circle consisted largely of tech professionals with similar backgrounds and attitudes toward money. This homogeneity had created blind spots in her financial thinking. The conversation deepened as they explored how successful investors manage social influences while maintaining strong relationships. Thomas shared the story of Lisa Park, who had developed creative ways to participate in social activities without compromising her financial goals. "The key," Thomas explained, "is understanding that financial decisions exist within a social context, but don't have to be controlled by it." He described how Michael Torres had learned to maintain his investment strategy despite working in an environment where aggressive trading was the norm. As the coffee shop crowd thinned, they discussed practical strategies for managing social influences on financial decisions. Thomas shared how different clients had approached this challenge. James Wilson created specific social spending accounts separate from his main financial planning, allowing him to participate in social activities while maintaining clear boundaries. Karen Chin developed a social pressure protocol, a series of questions she would ask herself when feeling influenced by peers' financial choices. The conversation turned to family influences on financial decisions. Emily shared her struggles with balancing her parents' conservative financial views with her own investment goals. Thomas introduced her to the concept of financial boundaries in family relationships, sharing how various clients had navigated similar challenges. As the morning progressed, they worked on developing Emily's own strategy for managing social influences. They created what Thomas called a social finance framework, a structured approach to maintaining financial independence while nurturing important relationships. The framework included specific strategies for managing conversations about money, participating in social activities within budget, maintaining relationships across different financial situations, filtering financial advice from various sources. Thomas emphasized that the goal wasn't to isolate oneself from social influences, but to engage with them consciously and strategically. He shared how Emily Martinez had actually strengthened her relationships by being more intentional about the role of money in her social life. As their session drew to a close, Thomas assigned Emily a new challenge, documenting social influences on her financial decisions for the next week. This would help her identify patterns and develop more effective strategies for managing these influences. Emily left the coffee shop with a new awareness of how social dynamics shaped her financial choices. Her journey continued, but now with a deeper understanding of the interplay between money and relationships. The lessons of this chapter extend beyond personal finance into every aspect of life where money and social relationships intersect. In the chapters that follow, we'll explore how successful individuals continue to refine their approach to managing these complex dynamics. As Thomas often reminded his clients, money is inherently social, but our choices about it don't have to be socially determined. This balance between connection and independence becomes crucial for long-term financial success. Chapter 7. Values-Based Financial Thinking. The autumn leaves danced past Thomas Chen's office window as Emily Martinez settled into her usual chair. Her week of tracking social influences on her financial decisions had revealed something unexpected, a disconnect between her stated values and her actual financial choices. I realized I've been making decisions based on what I think I should value, not what I actually value, Emily explained, opening her journal to share her observations. Thomas nodded, recognizing a crucial moment in her development as a critical thinker. Let me tell you about Marcus Wong, Thomas began. He spent 15 years climbing the corporate ladder in investment banking, accumulating wealth, but feeling increasingly empty. It wasn't until he examined the alignment between his values and his financial choices that he understood why. Marcus's story resonated with Emily. Like her, he had followed a conventional path to financial success, only to question whether that success was bringing him genuine satisfaction. His journey to realign his financial life with his personal values offered valuable lessons. The challenge, Thomas explained, isn't just identifying our values, but translating them into concrete financial decisions. He shared how Sarah Chun had transformed her approach to investing after realizing her portfolio contradicted her deeply held environmental values. Sarah's process began with what Thomas called a values audit, a systematic examination of her true priorities, not just her inherited or socially acquired values. This audit revealed gaps between what she claimed to value and how she actually allocated her resources. Emily leaned forward, intrigued by the concept. But how do you balance values with practical necessities? She asked, thinking of her own struggles between wanting to support sustainable companies and seeking competitive returns. Thomas shared the story of David Park, who had developed a framework for integrating values into financial decision-making without sacrificing financial security. David created what he called values-weighted decisions, where both financial and personal values criteria had to be met. The conversation turned to practical implementation. Thomas described how Maria Rodriguez had restructured her entire financial life to align with her core values after realizing her high-paying job was forcing her to compromise principles she held dear. Values alignment isn't just about feeling good, Thomas emphasized. It can actually lead to better financial decisions because you're more likely to stick with strategies that reflect your true priorities. He shared how Lisa Chun had maintained her investment strategy through market turbulence because it aligned with her values of patience and long-term thinking. As the afternoon progressed, they worked on developing Emily's own values-based financial framework. This process involved several key steps. First, identifying her genuine values, not just those she had absorbed from family, peers, or society. Thomas guided her through exercises designed to uncover her true priorities. Next, examining how these values could translate into specific financial criteria. They discussed how different investment approaches and financial strategies could align with various personal values. The conversation deepened as they explored how successful investors maintain their values-based approach despite market pressures. Thomas shared the story of Robert Kim, who had developed specific values checkpoints in his decision-making process to ensure he stayed true to his principles. Emily recognized patterns in her own behavior that revealed values she hadn't consciously acknowledged. Her preference for maximum liquidity, for instance, reflected a deeper value placed on freedom and independence. Thomas introduced the concept of values hierarchy, understanding which values take precedence when they conflict. He shared how James Wilson had created a systematic approach to resolving conflicts between different values in his financial decisions. As shadows lengthened across the office, they worked on integrating these insights into Emily's existing decision framework. The goal was to create a system that honored both her values and her need for financial security. The refined framework they developed included regular values assessments to ensure continued alignment, specific criteria for evaluating investments against personal values, strategies for managing conflicts between different values, methods for measuring success beyond purely financial metrics. Thomas emphasized that values-based financial thinking wasn't about sacrificing returns for principles, but about finding ways to honor both. He shared examples of investors who had achieved strong financial results while staying true to their values. Karen Torres's experience proved particularly relevant. As a social impact investor, she had developed sophisticated methods for evaluating investments based on both financial and values-based criteria. Her approach demonstrated how principles and profits could work together. As their session drew to a close, Thomas assigned Emily a new challenge, conducting a comprehensive values audit and examining how her current financial choices aligned with her true priorities. Remember, Thomas said as Emily prepared to leave, the most sustainable financial strategies are those that align with who we really are, not who we think we should be. Emily stepped out into the autumn evening with a new perspective on her financial journey. Understanding the role of values in financial decisions had added another dimension to her critical thinking toolkit. In the chapters that follow, we'll explore how successful investors continue to refine their values-based approach while adapting to changing market conditions and life circumstances. The integration of personal values with financial strategy becomes a powerful tool for maintaining long-term perspective and making more meaningful financial choices. Chapter 8. Rewriting Your Financial Story. The winter rain drummed against the windows of Thomas Chen's office as Emily Martinez shared her values audit results. The exercise had revealed something unexpected. Many of her financial decisions were being driven not by her current values, but by a story she had been telling herself since childhood. I keep finding myself making decisions based on this idea that financial security means never depending on anyone, Emily explained. It's like I'm still that scared kid watching my parents struggle after their divorce. Thomas nodded, recognizing a crucial insight. We all have these financial narratives, he explained. The question is whether they're serving us or limiting us. He shared the story of Michael Chong, whose journey from financial anxiety to confidence began with recognizing and rewriting his own money story. Michael had grown up hearing his immigrant parents repeat, "We can't afford that." Though he had become successful in his own right, this childhood narrative continued to influence his financial decisions well into adulthood, making him overly conservative even when taking risks might have been appropriate. Our financial stories shape our decisions in ways we rarely recognize, Thomas explained. He described how Rachel Wong had transformed her approach to investing after examining the narratives she had inherited from her family about wealth and success. Rachel's breakthrough came when she realized she was operating from her father's Great Depression-era beliefs about financial security. Though these beliefs had served her father well, they were leading her to miss opportunities in the modern economy. Emily leaned forward, intrigued. But how do you know which parts of your story to keep and which to change? she asked, thinking of her own complicated relationship with financial independence. Thomas shared how Linda Chun had approached this challenge. She had created what she called a story audit, systematically examining her financial beliefs and tracing them to their origins. This process helped her identify which beliefs were still relevant and which needed updating. The conversation turned to practical strategies for recognizing and rewriting limiting financial narratives. Thomas described how David Park had transformed his relationship with money by consciously creating a new story about wealth and success. The key, Thomas emphasized, isn't to completely abandon your old story, but to evolve it thoughtfully. He shared how Maria Rodriguez had maintained the core values from her family's financial teachings while updating the specific strategies for a changed world. As the afternoon deepened, they worked on identifying the key elements of Emily's financial narrative. They discovered recurring themes of self-reliance, security, and control, some serving her well, others limiting her growth. Thomas introduced the concept of narrative reframing, the process of consciously shifting how we interpret and tell our financial stories. He shared how James Wilson had transformed his view of market volatility from a threat to an opportunity by changing the story he told himself about market movements. Emily began to see how her narrative about financial independence, while rooted in valid concerns, had become overly rigid. Her fear of dependence had led her to miss opportunities for collaboration and growth. Together, they worked on developing what Thomas called a narrative bridge, a way to honor the valuable lessons from her past while creating space for new possibilities. This process involved identifying core themes in her financial story, examining which elements still serve her, creating new interpretations of old patterns, developing language for a more empowering narrative. Thomas shared how different clients had successfully navigated this transition. Sarah Lynn, for instance, had maintained her family's emphasis on financial prudence while redefining what prudence meant in modern markets. As the rain continued outside, they explored how successful investors maintain healthy financial narratives through market cycles. Thomas described how Robert Kim had developed specific practices for maintaining perspective during market volatility by staying connected to his larger financial story. The conversation turned to the role of narrative in long-term financial planning. Thomas shared how Emily Martinez had created a compelling vision for her financial future by consciously crafting a story that aligned with both her values and her goals. Emily began to see how her own narrative could evolve. While maintaining her value of independence, she could expand her story to include concepts of interdependence, growth, and possibility. As their session drew to a close, Thomas assigned Emily a new challenge, writing her financial autobiography, examining key moments that had shaped her money story and considering how she might reinterpret them. Remember, Thomas said as Emily prepared to brave the rain, your financial story isn't fixed. You can honor your past while writing new chapters that better serve your future. Emily left the office with a new understanding of how personal narrative shapes financial choices. Her journey continued, but now with awareness of how she could actively participate in shaping her financial story. The lessons of this chapter extend beyond personal finance into every area where our narratives influence our choices. In the chapters that follow, we'll explore how successful individuals continue to evolve their financial stories while maintaining connection to their core values. As Thomas often reminded his clients, every financial decision is part of a larger story. The question is whether we're consciously participating in shaping that story or simply living out old patterns. Chapter 9. Dancing with Market Cycles. The financial headlines screamed doom as Emily Martinez entered Thomas Chen's office for their weekly session. The market had dropped significantly, and she found herself fighting the urge to make dramatic changes to her portfolio. Her newly developed decision framework was being tested in real time. I know I shouldn't panic, Emily began, but it feels different when real money is involved. She pulled out her phone to show Thomas the sea of red numbers in her investment accounts. Thomas nodded, understanding the challenge. Let me tell you about Marcus Lee, he said, and how he learned to dance with market cycles rather than fight them. Marcus, a software engineer like Emily, had initially approached market volatility as a problem to be solved. He created increasingly complex trading algorithms, trying to predict and profit from market movements. It took losing a significant portion of his portfolio to realize he was fighting the wrong battle. The market, Thomas explained, isn't a problem to be solved. It's a cycle to be understood. He shared how Marcus had transformed his approach by studying market psychology rather than just price movements. Emily leaned forward, intrigued. But how do you maintain perspective when everything seems to be falling apart? The question reflected a struggle common to many investors facing their first significant market decline. Thomas introduced the concept of cycle awareness, understanding how market movements influence our psychology and decision-making. He described how Thomas Chen had developed specific practices for maintaining emotional equilibrium through market volatility. Sarah's approach involved creating what she called market cycle protocols, predetermined responses to different market conditions. These weren't attempts to predict market movements, but rather frameworks for managing her own behavior during different phases of the cycle. The key, Thomas emphasized, isn't trying to outsmart the market, but understanding how market cycles affect our thinking. He shared how David Wong had transformed his investment results by focusing on managing his responses rather than trying to predict market movements. The conversation turned to practical strategies for maintaining perspective during market volatility. Thomas described how Maria Rodriguez had created a market cycle journal, documenting not just market movements, but her emotional responses to them. As they explored these concepts, Emily began to see patterns in her own reactions to market changes. Her tendency to check her portfolio multiple times during volatile periods wasn't helping her make better decisions. It was amplifying her emotional responses. Thomas shared how successful investors maintain their strategic focus during market turbulence. He described Lisa Park's approach to using market volatility as a reminder to review her investment thesis rather than an impetus for immediate action. The afternoon deepened as they worked on developing Emily's own market cycle protocol. This framework would help her recognize different market phases, understand common psychological responses, maintain strategic focus during volatility, use market movements as opportunities for reflection. Thomas emphasized that the goal wasn't to eliminate emotional responses to market movements, but to develop healthier ways of processing and responding to them. He shared how James Wilson had learned to use market volatility as a tool for self-reflection rather than a source of anxiety. The conversation turned to the role of preparation in managing market cycles. Thomas described how Robert Chen had created specific practices for building emotional resilience during calm periods, making him better prepared for market turbulence. Emily began to see how her technical background could be an asset in understanding market cycles. Just as software systems go through periods of stability and volatility, markets move through predictable psychological phases. Thomas introduced the concept of cycle harvesting, using market movements to strengthen rather than weaken your investment strategy. He shared how Karen Torres had developed methods for using market volatility to rebalance her portfolio and reinforce her long-term approach. As their session continued, they worked on integrating these insights into Emily's existing decision framework. The goal was to create a system that would help her maintain perspective through different market conditions. The refined framework included regular review schedules independent of market movements, specific criteria for making changes during volatile periods, methods for maintaining strategic focus during market stress, practices for building emotional resilience. Thomas emphasized that successful investing isn't about predicting market movements, but about maintaining a consistent strategy through different market conditions. He shared examples of investors who had achieved strong long-term results by focusing on their response to market cycles rather than trying to predict them. As their session drew to a close, Thomas assigned Emily a new challenge, creating a personal market cycle playbook, documenting her intended responses to different market conditions before they occur. Remember, Thomas said as Emily prepared to leave, the market will continue to move in cycles. The question is whether we can learn to move with it rather than against it. Emily left the office with a new perspective on market volatility. Understanding market cycles had given her tools for maintaining emotional equilibrium during turbulent times. The lessons of this chapter extend beyond investment decisions into any area where we face cyclical challenges. In the chapters that follow, we'll explore how successful investors continue to refine their approach to market cycles while maintaining focus on their long-term objectives. As Thomas often reminded his clients, market cycles are inevitable. How we dance with them determines our success. Chapter 10. Bridging the Knowing-Doing Gap. The spring sunshine warmed Thomas Chen's office as Emily Martinez reviewed her market cycle playbook. While the document was thoughtfully constructed, something was bothering her. "I understand all of this," she said, gesturing to her carefully crafted plans, "but will I actually follow through when it matters?" Thomas smiled, recognizing a crucial moment in Emily's development. "You've just identified what I call the knowing-doing gap," he explained. "It's one thing to know what we should do, quite another to actually do it when emotions are running high." He shared the story of Richard Chong, a brilliant economist who could explain market dynamics in intricate detail, yet consistently made emotional investment decisions during market stress. Richard's journey from knowledge to effective action offered valuable lessons for bridging this critical gap. "Understanding isn't enough," Thomas explained. "We need systems that help us translate knowledge into action." He described how Sarah Lynn had transformed her investment approach by creating what she called implementation bridges, specific practices that helped her act on her knowledge even under pressure. Emily leaned forward, recognition flickering in her eyes. As a software engineer, she was familiar with the gap between theoretical knowledge and practical implementation. "But how do you build those bridges?" she asked, thinking of times when her carefully laid plans had crumbled in the face of market volatility. Thomas shared how Maria Rodriguez had approached this challenge. She developed a three-part system: preparation, practice, and accountability. During calm periods, she would rehearse her responses to different market scenarios, building muscle memory for challenging times. The conversation turned to practical strategies for bridging the knowing-doing gap. Thomas described how David Chun had created what he called action triggers, specific circumstances that would automatically initiate predetermined responses, removing the need for in-the-moment decisions. "The key," Thomas emphasized, "is reducing the cognitive load during stressful times." He shared how Lisa Park had simplified her decision-making process by creating clear, actionable rules that required minimal thinking during market stress. As the afternoon progressed, they worked on developing Emily's own implementation system. This involved identifying potential obstacles to action and creating specific strategies to overcome them. Thomas shared how different clients had successfully navigated this challenge. Michael Wong had created a decision deputy system, partnering with a trusted friend to review major financial decisions during volatile periods. This external perspective helped him maintain objectivity when emotions ran high. Karen Chen had developed a progressive implementation approach, breaking down complex financial decisions into smaller, more manageable steps. This made it easier to maintain momentum even when faced with uncertainty. The conversation deepened as they explored how successful investors maintain their commitment to action through challenging times. Thomas described how James Wilson had created regular implementation reviews, systematic assessments of the gap between his intended and actual behaviors. Emily began to see how her technical background could be an asset in bridging the knowing-doing gap. Just as she used testing protocols in software development, she could create specific tests for her financial decision-making process. Thomas introduced the concept of behavioral circuit breakers, predetermined points where automatic responses would kick in to prevent emotion-driven decisions. He shared how Robert Kim had used this approach to maintain his investment strategy during the 2008 financial crisis. As shadows lengthened across the office, they worked on integrating these insights into Emily's existing framework. The goal was to create a system that would help her act effectively even when emotions were running high. The refined framework included clear action triggers for different market conditions, simplified decision rules for stressful periods, regular implementation reviews, accountability partnerships, practice routines for building behavioral resilience. Thomas emphasized that the goal wasn't to eliminate emotion from financial decisions, but to create systems that would help her act effectively despite emotional pressure. He shared examples of investors who had achieved strong results by focusing on implementation rather than just knowledge. As their session drew to a close, Thomas assigned Emily a new challenge, identifying specific situations where she had failed to act on her knowledge in the past and creating detailed implementation plans for similar situations in the future. Remember, Thomas said as Emily prepared to leave, knowledge becomes power only when we can translate it into action. Emily left the office with a new understanding of the challenge ahead. Building knowledge was important, but creating systems for effective action was crucial for long-term success. The lessons of this chapter extend beyond investment decisions into any area where we struggle to act on our knowledge. In the chapters that follow, we'll explore how successful investors continue to refine their implementation systems while maintaining focus on their long-term objectives. As Thomas often reminded his clients, the most sophisticated strategy is worthless if we can't implement it when it matters most. Chapter 11. The Power of Financial Habits. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Thomas Chen's office as Emily Martinez shared her progress in implementing her new financial strategies. While she had made significant strides in developing frameworks and understanding market cycles, she noticed that her daily financial behaviors hadn't quite caught up with her knowledge. "It's like I'm living two different financial lives," Emily explained. "In our sessions, I think strategically about long-term goals, but in my day-to-day life, I still catch myself making impulsive decisions." Thomas nodded, understanding the challenge. "Let me tell you about Jennifer Lee," he began, "and how she transformed her financial life by focusing on habits rather than willpower." Jennifer, a successful attorney, had struggled with similar disconnects between her financial knowledge and daily behaviors. Despite her sophisticated understanding of investment principles, she found herself making emotional spending decisions that undermined her long-term goals. "The key to sustainable financial success," Thomas explained, "isn't just knowing what to do, but developing habits that make good decisions automatic." He described how Jennifer had systematically rebuilt her financial habits, starting with small, manageable changes that eventually transformed her relationship with money. Emily leaned forward intrigued. As someone who had developed coding habits through years of practice, she understood the power of automation in behavior. "But how do you develop new financial habits when old patterns are so deeply ingrained?" she asked. Thomas shared how Michael Chen had approached this challenge. Rather than trying to overhaul his entire financial life at once, Michael had created what he called habit stacking, attaching new financial behaviors to existing daily routines. The conversation turned to practical strategies for developing healthy financial habits. Thomas described how Sarah Rodriguez had transformed her spending patterns by creating specific environmental cues that triggered desired behaviors. "The environment shapes our habits more than willpower," Thomas emphasized. He shared how David Park had redesigned his digital environment to make thoughtful financial decisions easier and impulsive ones more difficult. As the evening approached, they worked on identifying Emily's current financial habits and developing strategies to optimize them. Thomas introduced the concept of habit auditing, systematically examining daily financial behaviors to understand their triggers and consequences. They discovered that many of Emily's financial decisions were triggered by emotional states rather than rational analysis. Like many professionals, she had developed a habit of retail therapy during stressful periods at work. Thomas shared how different clients had successfully reshaped their financial habits. Maria Torres had created a spending pause habit, waiting 24 hours before making any non-essential purchase over a certain amount. This simple practice had dramatically reduced her impulsive spending while allowing her to make thoughtful purchasing decisions. Robert Kim had developed a financial review habit, spending 10 minutes each morning examining his spending from the previous day. This regular practice helped him maintain awareness of his financial behaviors without becoming obsessive. The conversation deepened as they explored how successful investors maintain good habits through challenging times. Thomas described how Lisa Chun had created habit anchors, specific practices that helped her maintain financial discipline even during periods of stress or uncertainty. Emily began to see how her technical mindset could be an asset in habit formation. Just as she used version control in software development, she could create systems to track and manage her financial habits. Thomas introduced the concept of habit stacking, building new financial habits by connecting them to existing routines. He shared how James Wilson had successfully linked his investment review practice to his morning coffee ritual. As darkness fell outside, they worked on developing Emily's personal habit formation strategy. The goal was to create a system that would make good financial decisions more automatic and poor ones more difficult. The strategy included identifying current financial habits and their triggers, creating specific plans for developing new habits, designing environmental cues to support desired behaviors, establishing tracking systems for habit formation, building in regular habit reviews and adjustments. Thomas emphasized that successful habit formation isn't about perfection, but consistency. He shared examples of investors who had achieved remarkable results through the power of small, consistent actions over time. As their session drew to a close, Thomas assigned Emily a new challenge, identifying one keystone financial habit to develop over the next month, complete with specific implementation plans and success metrics. Remember, Thomas said as Emily gathered her things, "We are what we repeatedly do." Excellence in financial decisions comes not from knowledge alone, but from habits shaped by that knowledge. Emily left the office with a new understanding of the role habits play in financial success. While frameworks and strategies were important, daily habits would ultimately determine her financial outcomes. The lessons of this chapter extend beyond personal finance into any area where we seek to create lasting change. In the chapters that follow, we'll explore how successful investors continue to refine their habits while maintaining focus on their long-term objectives. As Thomas often reminded his clients, financial success is built one habit at a time. Chapter 12, Building Financial Resilience. The morning fog pressed against the windows of Thomas Chen's office as Emily Martinez arrived for her session, visibly stressed. A major project at work was threatening her carefully developed financial routines, and market volatility was testing her newfound habits. Everything was working fine until life got complicated, Emily explained, running her fingers through her hair. "Now I feel like I'm slipping back into old patterns just when I need my system most." Thomas nodded, understanding the challenge. "Let me tell you about Alexandra Wong," he began, and how she learned to build resilience into her financial life. Alexandra, a tech executive, had developed an impressive system for managing her finances during normal times. However, when faced with simultaneous challenges, a career transition, market downturn, and family emergency, she found her carefully constructed framework beginning to crack. Resilience, Thomas explained, isn't about having a perfect system that never fails. It's about building recovery mechanisms into your financial life. He described how Alexandra had transformed her approach by focusing on building flexibility and redundancy into her financial strategies. Emily leaned forward, recognizing her own situation in Alexandra's story. "But how do you maintain discipline when everything seems to be falling apart at once?" she asked, thinking of her current challenges. Thomas shared how Michael Chun had approached this challenge. Rather than trying to maintain rigid control during difficult periods, Michael had developed what he called resilience protocols, specific strategies for maintaining core financial principles while adapting to changing circumstances. The conversation turned to practical strategies for building financial resilience. Thomas described how Sarah Rodriguez had created what she called stress testing, regularly challenging her financial system with hypothetical scenarios to identify and strengthen weak points. "The key," Thomas emphasized, "is building recovery mechanisms before you need them." He shared how David Park had developed specific practices for maintaining financial stability during periods of personal or professional turbulence. As the morning progressed, they worked on identifying potential vulnerabilities in Emily's financial system and developing strategies to address them. Thomas introduced the concept of resilience mapping, systematically examining how different life challenges might impact financial stability. They discovered that many of Emily's financial strategies relied heavily on maintaining her current work routine. A change in job circumstances could potentially disrupt multiple aspects of her system simultaneously. Thomas shared how different clients had successfully built resilience into their financial lives. Maria Torres had created what she called financial buffer zones, specific reserves and strategies designed to absorb unexpected shocks without derailing her long-term plans. Robert Kim had developed a minimal viable financial practice, the core behaviors he would maintain even during highly stressed periods, letting go of less critical activities when necessary. The conversation deepened as they explored how successful investors maintain their financial stability through various life challenges. Thomas described how Lisa Chun had created resilience rituals, specific practices that helped her maintain financial perspective during difficult times. Emily began to see how her technical background could be an asset in building resilience. Just as she built redundancy and error handling into her code, she could build similar safeguards into her financial system. Thomas introduced the concept of adaptive capacity, the ability to maintain core financial principles while adjusting specific strategies to changing circumstances. He shared how James Wilson had successfully navigated multiple career transitions by focusing on financial principles rather than rigid rules. As the fog outside began to lift, they worked on developing Emily's personal resilience strategy. The goal was to create a system that could bend without breaking, maintaining essential financial practices even during challenging times. The strategy included identifying potential system vulnerabilities, creating specific recovery protocols, building buffer zones into various aspects of financial life, establishing minimum viable practices, developing strategies for maintaining perspective during stress. Thomas emphasized that true financial resilience comes from preparing for challenges while maintaining flexibility in responding to them. He shared examples of investors who had successfully navigated significant life changes while maintaining their financial stability. As their session drew to a close, Thomas assigned Emily a new challenge, conducting a resilience audit of her financial system, identifying potential vulnerabilities, and developing specific strategies to address them. Remember, Thomas said as Emily prepared to leave, resilience isn't about avoiding challenges. It's about building the capacity to recover from them. Emily left the office with a new understanding of financial resilience. While strong systems and habits were important, the ability to adapt and recover from disruptions would ultimately determine her long-term success. The lessons of this chapter extend beyond personal finance into any area where we seek to build sustainable success. In the chapters that follow, we'll explore how successful investors continue to refine their resilience strategies while maintaining focus on their long-term objectives. As Thomas often reminded his clients, financial success isn't about avoiding storms. It's about learning to sail through them. Chapter 13. The Long View. The summer heat pressed against the windows as Emily Martinez sat in Thomas Chen's office, reviewing her resilience audit. Her findings had led her to a deeper question about the nature of financial success itself. "I've been thinking about what all this is for," Emily began. "We spend so much time focusing on strategies and systems, but sometimes I lose sight of the bigger picture." Thomas smiled, recognizing a crucial moment in Emily's development. "Let me tell you about Richard Park," he said, "and how he learned to see beyond the numbers." Richard, a quantitative analyst, had mastered the technical aspects of investing. His models were sophisticated, his analysis precise. Yet he found himself constantly stressed about market movements, unable to feel the sense of security his wealth should have provided. The challenge, Thomas explained, isn't just building wealth, but understanding its role in a well-lived life. He described how Richard had transformed his approach by developing what he called life-centered financial thinking. Emily leaned forward, intrigued. As someone who had focused intensely on technical metrics and short-term performance, she understood the allure of immediate feedback. "But how do you maintain that broader perspective when daily concerns feel so urgent?" she asked. Thomas shared how Lisa Chun had approached this challenge. Rather than focusing solely on financial metrics, Lisa had developed what she called life benchmarks, measures of success that went beyond portfolio performance to include quality of life indicators. The conversation turned to practical strategies for maintaining long-term perspective. Thomas described how Maria Rodriguez had created a life vision document that helped her make financial decisions aligned with her broader life goals. The key, Thomas emphasized, is connecting daily financial choices to long-term meaning. He shared how David Wong had developed specific practices for maintaining this connection, even during periods of market stress. As afternoon shadows lengthened, they worked on developing Emily's own long-term perspective framework. Thomas introduced the concept of temporal expansion, the practice of consciously extending one's decision-making time frame. They discovered that many of Emily's financial stresses stemmed from an overly narrow time perspective. Like many young professionals, she had been measuring success in quarters rather than decades. Thomas shared how different clients had successfully developed and maintained long-term perspective. Sarah Lynn had created what she called perspective rituals, regular practices that helped her step back from daily market noise to focus on long-term objectives. Michael Chen had developed a legacy framework, connecting his financial decisions to the impact he wanted to have on future generations. The conversation deepened as they explored how successful investors maintain strategic focus through market cycles. Thomas described how James Wilson had created perspective anchors, specific reminders of his long-term goals that helped him resist short-term emotional decisions. Emily began to see how her technical mindset could support rather than hinder long-term thinking. Just as she planned software architecture for scalability, she could design her financial life with future growth in mind. Thomas introduced the concept of life-centered portfolio design, organizing investments around life goals rather than just returns. He shared how Karen Torres had restructured her entire financial approach around her vision for a meaningful life. As evening approached, they worked on developing Emily's personal long-term framework. The goal was to create a system that would help her maintain strategic focus while managing daily financial responsibilities. The framework included defining meaningful life benchmarks, creating connection points between daily decisions and long-term goals, establishing regular perspective reviews, building in mechanisms for maintaining strategic focus, developing practices for legacy thinking. Thomas emphasized that long-term perspective isn't about ignoring short-term realities, but about placing them in a broader context. He shared examples of investors who had achieved remarkable results by maintaining strategic focus through market cycles. As their session drew to a close, Thomas assigned Emily a new challenge, creating her own life vision document, articulating not just financial goals, but the broader impact she hoped to have through her financial choices. Remember, Thomas said, as Emily prepared to leave, the most important investment decisions aren't about money at all. They're about the life you want to create. Emily left the office with a new understanding of financial perspective. While technical skills and systems were important, the ability to maintain long-term focus would ultimately determine her success. The lessons of this chapter extend beyond personal finance into any area where we seek to create lasting impact. In the chapters that follow, we'll explore how successful investors continue to refine their long-term perspective while navigating short-term challenges. As Thomas often reminded his clients, true financial wisdom comes from seeing beyond the numbers to the life they represent. Chapter 14, Bringing It All Together. The autumn colors blazed outside Thomas Chen's office as Emily Martinez spread her various financial documents across his desk. Her decision framework, resilience protocols, habit tracking sheets, and life vision document. While each component was well developed, she felt challenged by integrating them into a seamless whole. "I have all these pieces," Emily said, gesturing at the papers, "but sometimes they feel like separate systems competing for attention rather than parts of a unified approach." Thomas nodded, understanding the challenge. "Let me tell you about Christina Way," he began, and how she learned to orchestrate the different elements of her financial life. Christina, a symphony conductor, had initially approached her finances like separate instruments playing different tunes. She had excellent systems for spending, saving, and investing, but they weren't working in harmony. Her breakthrough came when she began applying her musical understanding to financial integration. The key, Thomas explained, isn't just having good systems, but creating synergy between them. He described how Christina had transformed her approach by developing what she called financial orchestration, ensuring each element of her financial life supported and enhanced the others. Emily leaned forward, intrigued. As a systems architect, she understood the importance of integration in complex systems. "But how do you manage all these different components without becoming overwhelmed?" she asked. Thomas shared how Michael Torres had approached this challenge. Rather than trying to actively manage every aspect of his financial life simultaneously, Michael had developed what he called layered automation, creating systems that work together with minimal active intervention. The conversation turned to practical strategies for integration. Thomas described how Sarah Chun had created what she called a financial dashboard, a unified view of her various financial systems that helped her maintain perspective and coordination. Integration, Thomas emphasized, isn't about perfect coordination, but about productive harmony. He shared how David Park had developed specific practices for maintaining balance between different financial priorities. As they worked through the afternoon, they began identifying connection points between Emily's various systems. Thomas introduced the concept of system resonance, understanding how different financial practices could reinforce rather than compete with each other. They discovered that many of Emily's challenges stemmed from treating each financial system as an independent entity rather than part of a larger whole. Like many analytical thinkers, she had focused on optimizing individual components rather than overall system effectiveness. Thomas shared how different clients had successfully integrated their financial practices. Maria Rodriguez had created integration checkpoints, regular reviews that helped her ensure all aspects of her financial life remained aligned with her core values and goals. Robert Kim had developed a unified decision framework that helped him make choices considering multiple financial aspects simultaneously. The conversation deepened as they explored how successful investors maintain integration through changing circumstances. Thomas described how Lisa Chun had created adaptive integration, systems that could maintain harmony while adjusting to new situations. Emily began to see how her technical expertise could help rather than hinder integration. Just as she designed scalable software architectures, she could design financial systems that grew and evolved together. Thomas introduced the concept of financial ecology, understanding how different financial practices interact and influence each other. He shared how James Wilson had restructured his entire approach around this principle of interconnection. As evening approached, they worked on developing Emily's personal integration strategy. The goal was to create a unified approach that would help her manage different financial aspects without becoming overwhelmed. The strategy included identifying key integration points between systems, creating coordination mechanisms, establishing regular integration reviews, building adaptive capacity into the system, developing practices for maintaining overall balance. Thomas emphasized that successful integration isn't about rigid control, but about creating productive relationships between different financial practices. He shared examples of investors who had achieved remarkable results through well-integrated approaches. As their session drew to a close, Thomas assigned Emily a new challenge, creating a system map showing how different aspects of her financial life could work together more effectively. Remember, Thomas said as Emily gathered her documents, the power isn't in the individual pieces, but in how they work together. Emily left the office with a new understanding of financial integration. While strong individual systems were important, their ability to work together would ultimately determine their effectiveness. The lessons of this chapter extend beyond personal finance into any area where we seek to manage complex systems. In the chapters that follow, we'll explore how successful investors continue to refine their integrated approach while adapting to new challenges. As Thomas often reminded his clients, financial mastery isn't about perfecting individual practices, but about creating harmony between them. Chapter 15, The Ever-Evolving Journey. The winter sun cast long shadows across Thomas Chen's office as Emily Martinez arrived for what would be their last regular session. Over the past year, she had transformed from someone seeking simple investment advice into a thoughtful financial decision-maker. Yet today, she seemed troubled. "The more I learn," Emily began, "the more I realize how much I don't know. Is that normal?" She gestured to her integrated system map, now covered with questions and potential revisions. Thomas smiled, recognizing a sign of true progress. "Let me tell you about Margaret Chun," he said, "and how she learned to embrace uncertainty as a source of growth." Margaret, a renowned research scientist, had initially approached financial decisions like scientific experiments, seeking definitive answers and conclusive results. Her breakthrough came when she realized that financial wisdom, like scientific knowledge, was constantly evolving. The goal, Thomas explained, isn't to reach a final destination, but to develop a sustainable practice of growth. He described how Margaret had transformed her approach by cultivating what she called intellectual humility in her financial life. Emily leaned forward, intrigued. As someone who had always sought mastery in her field, she understood the challenge of balancing expertise with openness to new learning. But how do you maintain confidence in your decisions while staying open to new ideas? She asked. Thomas shared how Rachel Wong had approached this challenge. Rather than seeing confidence and curiosity as opposites, Rachel had developed what she called dynamic stability, maintaining core principles while actively seeking new perspectives. The conversation turned to practical strategies for continuous learning. Thomas described how David Park had created what he called learning loops, systematic ways of extracting insights from both successes and failures. The key, Thomas emphasized, is developing practices that support ongoing growth. He shared how Maria Rodriguez had built regular learning reviews into her financial routine, treating each decision as an opportunity for deeper understanding. As afternoon light faded, they worked on identifying Emily's own opportunities for continued growth. Thomas introduced the concept of strategic curiosity, directing learning efforts toward areas that could most enhance overall financial effectiveness. They discovered that Emily's technical mindset, which had initially led her to seek perfect solutions, could be redirected towards systematic exploration and experimentation. Like writing modular code, she could build flexibility into her financial thinking. Thomas shared how different clients had successfully maintained growth mindsets. Sarah Lynn had created learning portfolios, small portions of her investments dedicated to exploring new strategies and ideas while maintaining her core approach. Michael Chen had developed knowledge mapping, systematically identifying areas for deeper learning and understanding. The conversation deepened as they explored how successful investors maintain both stability and growth in their financial practice. Thomas described how Lisa Park had created growth rituals, specific practices that helped her continue learning while maintaining confidence in her core approach. Emily began to see how her professional experience with continuous integration could inform her approach to financial learning. Just as software systems require regular updates and improvements, financial thinking needs ongoing refinement. Thomas introduced the concept of adaptive expertise, developing deep knowledge while maintaining flexibility and openness to new insights. He shared how James Wilson had structured his entire approach around this principle of continuous evolution. As evening approached, they worked on developing Emily's ongoing learning strategy. The goal was to create sustainable practices for growth that would serve her well beyond their formal sessions. The strategy included regular review and reflection practices, systematic ways to explore new ideas, methods for testing and integrating new insights, approaches for maintaining balance between stability and growth, practices for building long-term learning habits. Thomas emphasized that true financial wisdom comes not from knowing everything, but from maintaining an effective learning practice. He shared examples of investors who had achieved remarkable results through commitment to ongoing growth. As their final regular session drew to a close, Thomas assigned Emily one last challenge, creating her own learning manifesto, articulating not just what she had learned, but how she would continue growing. Remember, Thomas said as Emily prepared to leave, this isn't an ending, but a beginning. Every financial decision is an opportunity to learn and grow. Emily left the office with a new understanding of financial wisdom. While she had developed strong systems and practices, her commitment to continued learning would ultimately determine her long-term success. The lessons of this chapter extend beyond personal finance into any area where we seek sustained growth and development. As we conclude this book, remember that financial wisdom isn't a destination, but a journey of continuous discovery and refinement. As Thomas often reminded his clients, the most valuable investment you can make is in your own capacity for learning and growth. Epilogue: Beyond the Numbers. Snow fell softly outside the coffee shop window, where Emily Martinez and Thomas Chen met 6 months after their final regular session. The bustling cafe where they had once explored the social dimensions of money now served as a perfect setting to reflect on Emily's continuing journey. Emily arrived carrying her well-worn notebook, its pages now filled with observations, insights, and questions that extended far beyond their original discussions. As she settled into her seat, Thomas noticed a different quality in her presence, a quiet confidence that came not from certainty, but from comfort with complexity. "Something interesting happened last week," Emily began, opening her notebook. "During a major market downturn, I found myself feeling not anxiety, but curiosity. I actually caught myself looking forward to applying what we discussed about market cycles." Thomas smiled, recognizing the transformation in his former client. The journey they had documented in this book had evolved from a search for financial answers into something far more valuable: the development of a thoughtful, resilient approach to both money and life. Over steaming cups of coffee, they discussed how Emily's relationship with money had transformed. Her technical skills remained sharp as ever, but they now served a deeper understanding. Market movements that once triggered anxiety now prompted reflection. Financial decisions that once felt overwhelming now offered opportunities for growth. "The biggest change," Emily reflected, "isn't in my portfolio performance, though that has improved. It's in how I think about money itself. It's become less about numbers and more about possibilities." This shift reflected the core message of their journey together: that financial wisdom goes beyond mathematical optimization or perfect strategies. It emerges from the integration of critical thinking, emotional intelligence, and a clear sense of purpose. Emily shared how she had continued to evolve the systems they had developed together. Her decision framework had grown more nuanced, incorporating both analytical and intuitive elements. Her resilience protocols had proven effective during market volatility. Her habit patterns had strengthened, making good financial choices increasingly automatic. Her long-term perspective had deepened, connecting daily decisions to broader life goals. But more importantly, she had developed something they hadn't explicitly discussed: a genuine curiosity about the role of money in creating a meaningful life. "I've started mentoring younger developers at work," Emily shared, "and I find myself sharing not just technical advice, but perspectives on financial thinking we explored together." Thomas nodded, understanding that true learning often reveals itself in our ability to help others grow. The principles they had explored together, critical thinking, emotional awareness, systematic decision-making, had applications far beyond personal finance. As they discussed the future, it became clear that Emily's journey would continue evolving. She had questions about applying their principles to new challenges: entrepreneurship, philanthropy, legacy planning. But these questions no longer carried the anxiety of her earlier concerns. Instead, they reflected an eager curiosity about new possibilities. "What I've realized," Emily said as their meeting drew to a close, "is that financial wisdom isn't about eliminating uncertainty. It's about developing the capacity to engage with it thoughtfully." This insight captured the essence of their work together. In a world of increasing financial complexity, the goal isn't to find perfect answers, but to develop robust ways of thinking and deciding. As snow continued to fall outside, Thomas reflected on the broader implications of Emily's journey. Each reader of this book would face unique financial challenges, but the principles remained constant. The importance of understanding our relationship with money, the value of systematic thinking in financial decisions, the need for emotional awareness and resilience, the power of maintaining long-term perspective, the vital role of continuous learning and growth. These principles, when thoughtfully applied, offer a path not just to better financial decisions, but to a more intentional and meaningful life. As Emily prepared to leave, she paused. "You know what's funny?" she said, gathering her things. "When I first came to see you, I thought I was just looking for investment advice. I had no idea I was starting a journey that would change how I think about everything." Thomas smiled, knowing that her journey, like that of every thoughtful investor, would continue long after their formal work together had ended. The principles and practices documented in this book weren't an endpoint, but a foundation for ongoing growth and discovery. For readers beginning their own journey toward financial wisdom, remember that the path isn't always straight, and the destination isn't fixed. The reward lies not just in better financial outcomes, but in the development of a more thoughtful, nuanced approach to both money and life. As Thomas often reminded his clients, the most valuable returns aren't measured in dollars, but in the wisdom gained along the way. The snow was falling harder as Emily stepped out into the winter evening, her notebook tucked securely under her arm, ready to continue her ever-evolving journey toward financial wisdom.